if you're starting out and you have your first failure, it can be so damn detrimental to how you feel about yourself. And when you have that first failure and you fall to your knees, it's hard to get back up. Like sometimes that first try may be actually easy because maybe you're oblivious to how hard something's about to be. But when you fall to your knees, how the hell do you get back up? And that's the thing that I really want to focus on today. Because as you guys notice, it wasn't the title of how not to fail. The title of this is how to overcome failure. Because the truth is, it's really not if, it's when. So if we can just all like put our hands in, the circle and go, okay, we're going to fail and go, then at least there's no fear that you're wondering if you're going to fail or not. So that idea just allowed me to jump in the deep end on many things that I had zero idea what I was doing. So today it's going to be about when you fail. It's not going to be about if. Now, I wrote a book called Radical Confidence, and I have a chapter in it that's called When the Beep Hits the Fan, Wear Goggles. For this very reason, because I want you to stop worrying about what happens when the beep hits the fan, because it's going to. So now the idea is if you put your goggles on, that just protects you from the failure as much as possible. And it's less mess to clean up is how I like to use the analogy. So right now I'm going to teach you how to put on the goggles, not about how not to face the failure. So I've realized there's actually two types of failures. There's one that no one sees, that you could just like brush away and pretend it didn't happen, right? And you're like, oh, well, thank God that wasn't public. Thank God that wasn't on camera. Thank God no one was around to see it. But I like to liken that to, I don't know if you guys ever watched The Usual Suspect. One of my favorite quotes is from Kaiser Sose. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. Now, in this situation, the devil is your failure. So if you pretend it didn't exist, it's only going to hold you back. It's only going to lead to disaster. So the big key is when you have a private failure, you don't want to hide from it. And I'm going to go deep into that. Then the second thing is when you have a public failure. You're going to think, oh my God, it will maybe ding your ego because now everybody's witness to it. Now, the problem is you're going to have some people that aren't going to be nice about your failure. So how do you make sure that when you fail publicly, imagine it's the worst possible, like your nightmare actually has come true. Let's just do the worst case scenario. It actually comes true. That failure that you're like really dreading and regretting happens, and now it happens in front of everybody. How the hell, homie, do you make sure that you get back up? That's the freaking key. So I want to go over these different types of failures and all the strategies that I use, depending on which one hits me in a certain way. But these strategies are going to help you to go back to these tactics time and time again, regardless of if it was a public failure or a private failure. Okay, so now let's dive in. The very first thing that you got to do is you've got to change your identity. Now, what do I mean by that? People think that if you fail, that makes you a failure. And the truth is, it doesn't make you a failure. It makes you freaking human. Let me just repeat that. If you fail, make sure that your identity doesn't say that you are a failure. It means you failed, but it doesn't make you a failure. It makes you human. I want you to point to one person. One person. I'm not even going to say one successful person. I'm just going to say one person that hasn't failed. So now the great news is you're not alone. You're just like all the rest of us that just keep failing. So remember, as you start to develop your identity, you need to shift it from being the failure to the learner. Now, actually, I kind of stole this from my husband. He definitely taught it from me because I used to feel this thing and get really upset every time I would fail. I used to think that it was something about me. And what he said is if you just change your identity of how you approach it, it will change everything. And guys, this really did freaking knock me for six and change the way that I see it. So the one thing I want you to write down right now is failing is an action. It's not an identity. Okay, now once you realize that, you're going to have to figure out how you make sure that when it happens, it doesn't dent your ego, because it's the ego that's going to hold you back. It's going to be the ego, or the voice in your head that I like to call it, that's going to tell you you're no good. It's going to tell you, see, I told you you were going to fail. See, I told you you were no good. And so in order to make sure that voice in your head doesn't hold you back, you have to come up with strategies and tactics. So let's take being the learner, shall we? If I fail, in fact, I'm going to start with an Edison quote. He said, I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've successfully found 10,000 ways that it didn't work, when he was doing the light bulb. That's so good. I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've successfully found 10,000 ways that it didn't work. He's adopted the idea of the learner. He didn't go and go, oh, well, I'm no good now. He's like, okay, great. That didn't work. How can I learn and get better from this failure? So now imagine, guys, if you're listening, you failed 20 times, 30 times. If you say that means something about you, your ego's going to have a field day, and it's going to be jumping up and down saying, I told you so, I told you so. But if you have the identity of a learner and you fail, now you're like, oh my God, this is amazing, because now it actually gives me another chance to learn. So in just flipping your identity from being maybe someone that always fails, someone that's no good, you've now flipped it to when you fail, it becomes an excitement because your identity is the learner. And so this failure is going to help propel you forward. So that was so freaking huge for me that I had to start there. Now, just because you fail though, it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to deal with. So even with this mindset stuff, even with you guys telling yourself that you're the learner, maybe, I'm just going to project for a second, maybe you guys are a little like me and I strive for perfection. Like I really want everything to be amazing. I want something to be perfect. So A, that stops me from trying. And then B, it actually stops me from learning from my failure. And so if you're the type of person, this is number 2, permission to be imperfect. So I want you guys to write that down. You want to give yourself permission to be imperfect. Now, why is that true? Why do you need to do that? Because perfection won't serve you. Like it literally will stop you from taking a chance to then learn from the mistake. Now, there was a study that was done. It was a psychologist. He took 2 actors and he goes to a grocery store. And I don't know if you guys ever seen there's people that do like the testers. It's like, oh, check out this blender. Look how amazing it is, right? And they're trying to make sales. So the psychologist hired these 2 actors and they chose one person, and the person goes and she's by her counter at the grocery store and she's got a blender and she's putting her ingredients in and she does it all perfectly and she like leaves and everyone like round of applause. And the second person, actor, comes in and she mixes the ingredients, same blender, everything, mixes the ingredients and forgets to put the lid on properly. And so she presses on the blender and the whole thing explodes everywhere. Perfect. Total klutz. Who do you think, type it in the comments, who do you think sold more blenders, people? I want to hear from you. Who do you think? It was the klutz. The person that the smoothie stuff went everywhere and she made the total mess, she was the one that actually sold more blenders. She wasn't perfect. She was far from perfect. Yeah, everyone's saying the second one. So when you strive for perfection, remember this story. Remember that people don't want perfection.
This can be your day for personal growth. This can be that day you committed to and you remember and you go, that was the day I got myself a community. I got better coaches. I committed to making my life the absolute best that I could. This is that day. Make today your growth day. Click the button on this page and sign up right now.